Yes, okay, fine, yes. Okay, thanks everybody for coming to listen to me. I know you had a choice, so thanks for that. My name's David Munn. I'm an associate professor in ELT at the University of Sussex. I work within a language centre there, within a faculty probably similar to many of you that have come here today. But what I'm talking about today is a small action research project that I carried out last summer. Sorry. Oh, wait, sorry. Yeah. I carried out this project at my TNE, my university's key TNE partner, which is a joint institute in China, in Hangzhou. This joint institute is called Zhejiang Gongshang University, ZJSU, and it is a university that specialises in robotics, communications engineering, artificial intelligence. So my project was looking specifically at teachers, EAP teachers at this joint institute who were delivering an EAP course that we had put together, a pre-sessional course that we had put together at the University of Sussex. So I was looking at these teachers' approaches to delivering this course, their views on EAP, and how there might be perhaps alignments or mismatches between the way in which they talk about EAP, they understand EAP, and what they might do in practice. So perhaps what I'm talking about today is not generalisable because of the nature of this research. It might be at least relatable to others who are working in similar contexts. So what I'll do first of all is give you a bit of background to my context, my TNE work within my department, where that's started from, where it goes to. I'll then talk about some of the methods I used in this project, what I found out, what some of the significance might be from that, and then any recommendations and how I'm thinking of following those up. So a bit of background to the context in which I work. So in 2020, the University of Sussex started this TNE partnership with this joint institute in China, offering degrees, 4-year degrees, undergraduate degrees in robotics and communications engineering, and 2-year postgraduate degrees in robotics and AI-related subjects. These courses were taught by the engineering department within Sussex, and they sent out staff in a flying faculty model, as some of you might have heard of already, i.e. staff being flown out for short bursts, periods of time to deliver modules as part of these degrees. So this started at that point. Now, I became involved within this partnership, within this context, in 2022 as a TNE coordinator within my department. So my role, I was asked to provide more EAP provision for these students studying on these degrees. That came in different forms. So I won't go into everything that I've done because it's not related to what I'm talking about with this project, but one of the things I did was to create 2 undergraduate credit-bearing EAP modules. I also helped to recruit a TNE-focused staff for our department and so on. But a big part of my job, my role since this time has been to kind of work on devising a pre-sessional course, a specific bespoke pre-sessional course for the students, for these postgrad students studying at this joint institute in China, okay, specifically face-to-face course at this university in China. So this started in 2024. We rolled out the first iteration of this course. We had about 50 students enrolled on it. It was taught by three teachers who were recruited from the Foreign Languages Department at the Joint Institute. 3 Chinese national teachers, and because we were unable to send staff from our own department out to deliver this, so we had to draw on the support of the Joint Institute to help us to deliver this, to meet this demand. A feature of this, sort of perhaps a controversial feature maybe of this course, is that the college English test is used as a gatekeeping test to allow students onto this pre-sessional course and the degree. So the college English test is perhaps, I say it's controversial because there's not a clear mapping to the Common European Framework. It is heavily weighted in favour of reading, and in some cases speaking components might be missing from this as well. So it's quite hard to get a clear picture of the proficiency of the students who are coming in to take the pre-sessional course. So this is one element in which we're having to grapple with, which is obviously different to the way in which gatekeeping might be managed if you were, accepting international students onto a pre-sessional in the UK. After this, we had discussions with the International Office, with the Joint Institute, with the engineering department, and we were arguing that if they were going to keep this test as a gatekeeping exam, we should at least extend the length of the course. So we argued about extending it, and we came up with an 8-week course instead of a 5-week one, although personally perhaps a 10-week one would have been better. But anyway, so we extended it to 8 weeks. And then this was rolled out last summer to 78 students, again at this face-to-face at this campus. It was taught by this time 5 staff, 5 teachers, again from the Foreign Languages Department within the Joint Institute, and so that was the case we were facing. Now, as the person who was the convener of this course, I felt it very important to be able to understand more about the teachers that we were using to help us to deliver this course that we'd created, that we'd asked to create. So I wanted to look at that, to try and get more evidence around these people, who they were, what they knew, what they could bring to this, and then how best to potentially support them with this work, this project going forward. Hence my research project. So what did I do? How did I go about that? Well, obviously the first thing was to look first at other research that was out there into EAP teaching in China, to research an EAP teaching in China, and to see what was common, what was being talked about, to see if this could connect to my context in some way. So some studies that I looked at did make a connection between EAP teacher practice and identity in TNE contexts. There was some information out there that tried to show how EAP teachers were operating within specific TNE context. However, perhaps less research I could find which connected EAP and TNE together. There tended to be a lot of research out there which looked at EAP in China, as some of the other presentations have mentioned already today, but it seemed to be that this was more around Chinese higher education institutions where EAP was operating. And within that context, there was this particular study here, this Cheng study, which talked about some of the conflicts with introducing EAP into Chinese higher education institutions, because this conflict with the college English teaching system that operates there. So those of you that might not be familiar with this is a sort of an undergraduate sort of program that students often take within Chinese higher education institutions, and it focuses on sort of general proficiency, so general language proficiency. So it could be considered, maybe we might interpret it as being like General English in some ways. The topics are quite general in their focus. But also there's a sort of cultural, sort of social aspects attached to this type of teaching as well. It's prioritised as well. So if there's a sort of a need to introduce an EAP program, and if the college English teaching is already happening there, then why introduce it? There's some of the research suggests that, and also it's government supported as well. So there's a lot of investment in these programs already. Other studies I found which seemed to be relevant, seemed to be interesting, were about some EAP teachers in China talking about feeling qualified enough to be able to teach EAP, and sometimes connecting it to subject-oriented English, thinking that they might need to be perhaps subject specialists in terms of the vocabulary or maybe the content. I think the first talk today we heard mentioned something similar on that, and that they didn't have that knowledge, or the time that it would take to develop that knowledge was challenging for them. And then also other studies which looked at that there was little guidance for those who wanted to transition from perhaps general English teaching into EAP. And also some of the studies we might already know about, which look at teachers who transition from general English into EAP, tended to be sort of more within the UK, sort of grammar context as well. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, through the sort of informal conversations that I was having with these teachers who, over the years, some of these features seem to be apparent, through conversations, through observations, and so on. But obviously, I didn't have enough clearer picture about them. So this was the start of trying to understand maybe how they might be thinking or approaching teaching on this pre-sessional course. So obviously, I wanted to develop a clearer picture. So what did I do? I was trying to think of answers to these two questions here. So what do these teachers know, and think about EAP, and what can they do within a class, within a pre-sessional course? And from that, are there any opportunities for any kind of professional development interventions? So I've taken a sort of an action research approach to this. The reason being because I'm obviously keen to develop my practice as a convener on this course, to understand more about those people that I'm working with, to help their development, if that is what's needed. I also am very conscious as well to think about how any recommendations I put forward are then further evaluated as a part of a cycle, or this sort of spiral of reflection and action and so on. So at this stage in my project, I'm kind of at the early stages, so the kind of reconnaissance stage leading to the plan. So that's where I am at the moment. Now, who I've obviously mentioned these teachers. Who were they? This is a bit of information about them. So we had, as I mentioned, we had 5 teachers working on this course last summer, but I could only look at 3 participants for this project due to time constraints and issues around that. But those particular participants, they had between 10 to sort of 20 years of English language teaching experience, mostly in college English teaching, but all in China as well. Some had some ESP experience, like business teaching, business English teaching, and some coordinating experience. They all had qualifications to support their teaching, but these were all from Chinese higher education institutions. So none of them had, done masters in the UK or things like that. They all had high level of language proficiency, so between sort of 7 and 8. That's just my own estimate of my experience with that. and all had limited experience of working on EAP courses, but all motivated to develop a knowledge and practice in EAP. So all seeing as this is as important as a part of their career trajectories. So wanting to be a part of this, you know, the teaching on this course, this pre-sessional course. So what did I do? As I said, this is action research, and you know, maybe could be considered to be a bit light touch, maybe, but I wanted to give it some methodological rigour as well. So I looked into other studies into the area of teacher cognition, which seemed to be the area which kind of, you know, related to what I was trying to do here. And within that, obviously, I observed one lesson from each teacher, which was about 90 minutes. I followed that up with an interview, which lasted about an hour, and then some respondent checking methods as well. I also, you know, tried to follow institutional ethical review processes, so I went through those within my faculty and got approval to do this project. One of the things that came from that, which perhaps was important to note as well, was the importance to sort of try to differentiate my role as a convener and a researcher, and try to mitigate some of the biases that might come from that. And the way I went about that was by, you know, giving reassurances, you know, providing anonymity and so on. So trying my best within this context to mitigate where I could. Another thing that I did within this project was to draw on some of the Barley TEEP competencies and some CELTA descriptions as a way to help me create a framework to guide my observations and the interviews that I was carrying out. Why did I choose these? Well, I'm a TEEP assessor. I'm familiar with the competencies. Barley does have a descriptions of what it means to be an EAP practitioner. I know there's been some discussion about how suitable they are, but you know, at least there is something written down that could be used here to help guide a view of what's happening with these teachers, and also these CELTA ones. I'll give you some example of these. I haven't included all of the ones that I within the project, just a few, just to give you an idea of what I was looking at, maybe. So yeah, you can see here I've taken some from the sort of the teaching criteria within the competencies, which is at all levels, at associate fellow and senior fellow, some at associate fellow, and also some CELTA ones, which I felt better described some of the CLT, communicative language teaching informed approaches, which might fit within what an EAP lesson might require. I say that because I'd read and sort of witnessed some other people giving presentations in a similar fashion, and this talk about being versed in General English seemed to be something that I wanted to get a clearer picture of, and whether some CLT-informed practices were still present in this sense. So what did I find out? So on this slide here, I'm talking about this idea of positive alignment. So what I mean by this is essentially, you know, what was being said in the interview, what was being witnessed in the lesson, and that there were some links here, some alignments. So essentially, you know, what I was seeing was that, you know, these participants had an awareness of the differences between General English and EAP teaching, in that they were able to consider the way in which an EAP lesson might flow, might work, that they could scaffold tasks, stage them appropriately, provide feedback on language use, the need to analyse texts and so on. So kind of the sort of things you might imagine, you know, as someone who was working towards a TEEP certification might have. So sort of, these positive features being present there, and also as well some elements from what could come from communicative language teaching models as well, and these seem to be coming through within this EAP teaching context. And I want to pick up on one of those specifically here. This is a quote from one of the interviews from a participant, and she's talking about this idea of learner-centeredness, perhaps within her teaching. I'll just let you read that before I tell you what I think it means. So in a way, this idea of learner-centeredness, this teacher was obviously, her approach to teaching AAP, it was important for her to establish rapport with her students, to provide opportunities for them to speak in a way which is suited to them, that they could maintain a share of participation, and considering their needs as well. So this, as I say, this came through with this person with their teaching and what they were saying about their teaching. However, there was some evidence as well of views and practice which perhaps might not sit so comfortably with people who are more accustomed to CLT methods and so on. So things like pair work not always be producing effective learning, or sticking rigidly to lesson materials, offering few open-ended questions that elicit meaningful responses, and so on. So, yeah, I mean, this was apparent as well. Although interesting to note, this didn't seem to have a significant impact on the students or the sort of the pace of the lesson. It wasn't. I'm not saying that because these were negative features of their teaching. It's just something that I observed. But yeah. So something that was coming through as well within some of their practice. So teachers potentially kind of mixing approaches from previous educational experiences, of teaching experiences, with this new context maybe that they have to work in. And this was one another quote that picks up on that point as well. So this teacher was talking about her previous experiences of teaching and how that might impact on how they might operate with an EAP class. But obviously as well within teacher cognition studies there are sort of mismatches that are mentioned within that research as well, and that's the same for what was happening with me as well. There were mismatches between obviously sort of belief or view and practice within the classroom as well. So one of those in particular related to this idea of understanding lesson aims. So teachers could articulate the goals of an observed lesson and the sort of broader ideas of the pre-sessional course, but when it came to the staging or the execution maybe of parts of their lesson, this might leave you to question whether their priorities were suited to help demonstrate awareness of these lesson aims. And this is one extract as well from a teacher. I'll let you read this. Although you can see I've kind of underlined some parts here as well, and although this was from a lesson which was about vocabulary note-taking strategies, this same point applied to other lessons I'd observed as well. I mean, but you could just replace the words underlined with, you know, another focus of that lesson. So, in a way, how to prioritise the parts of this lesson which were important to demonstrate learning within the students. So this, you know, how to explain that? Perhaps, you know, asking, you know, do these students know or understand what is being taught through maybe the production or use of a skill or a language structure? This is similar to displaying comprehensible output. Do the learners have chances to notice gaps in their learning and reflect on the usage through feedback from the teacher? Is this something which comes from CLT but still has, you know, resonance within EAP teaching? Is that being overlooked possibly in this case? And this is one more sort of thing I'll point out from the project. So another mismatch, and again relating to this maybe idea of awareness of students' academic literacies. So again, you know, through the interview, you know, the teachers are kind of aware of connecting their teaching in EAP to the students' skills or language of their disciplines. But again, how does that play out in the class? What do we see? What's happening there? And similar to what others have reported as well, in the sense that teachers need to be versed or think more carefully about the academic practice elements that go into EAP teaching. And these are two extracts. The first one is my notes about one teacher, and the other one is some views of a teacher's view of themselves. So again, I'll let you read that. So my comment here is really about this idea of transfer, in a sense, or raising the importance of a particular skill that's being taught in that lesson, and how that might relate to the student's degree, post pre-sessional. And the other one relates to what this teacher is talking about themselves and about what they need to know, what EAP a teacher needs to know. In that they're thinking about being knowledgeable about vocabulary. So it made me think that maybe, it comes back to that idea that I mentioned previously about teachers feeling the need to be kind of versed in the content or the vocabulary of the student's subject area. Because they might not have that, it might mean that they're less inclined to talk about why what they're teaching might have relevance to these students and their subjects, right? Or maybe they just don't know enough about what their students are going on to do as a part of their postgrad degree. So these were other observations that I had. So I'm quite conscious about about this project. I know it's got serious limitations. I've obviously only looked at three teachers for a very short period of time within this course. Unfortunately, I didn't have the scope or the resource to be able to do anything else, but I still wanted to try to understand a bit more about them and to sort of document a bit more to help inform any change that could come from this, or any intervention that could come from this. So, the data, my explanation, it doesn't reveal a full picture, obviously, but it's a starting point, and obviously I'm keen to revisit anything I suggest and to refine sort of going forward. However, I appreciate that I need to come up with something. I need to present something. And what is that? You know, what am I suggesting that I am then going to refine? So the next stage of this cycle, this spiral, sort of, yeah, a couple of ideas. And again, these are things I'm thinking as a part of an induction of the next iteration of this course that could be included somehow. So, in a way, you know, maybe taking, you know, lessons from the pre-sessional and asking the teachers to, you know, to sort of talk through how they might teach them, to document how each stage of a lesson might fit together, to anticipate any problems from teaching or from learning from the students' perspectives, and how they might deal with those. And also maybe asking questions around how they think which parts of a lesson might help students to demonstrate their learning in a way that achieves the outcomes of that lesson. So is there a particular, if the lesson requires it, is there a particular task or something they're doing in that lesson which would allow the teacher to notice that the students have understood effectively what has gone into that lesson up to that point? And does that help them to gauge a sense of how the students are learning that? Another thing as well to point out, you know, I mean, I'm quite keen not to, although, you know, I'm bringing this course there, and I'm asking them to teach this course in this way according to these standards which I'm being asked to uphold. I'm very conscious around, you know, not excluding their previous experiences, their previous educational experiences, what they can bring, which still could have value to working in this context. So, you know, one of the things that I did when I put together the course is I obviously put together the materials, and I put teachers' notes to explain how I might imagine teaching these, and, you know, maybe there are ways to bring that into this next sort of induction by asking them around, you know, which features of that they feel comfortable with, uncomfortable with, how there's a conflict there possibly. So that might give me a better sense of how they might approach some of these tasks that I'm asking them to do as a part of this course. Another thing to bring in as well is how to sort of kind of addressing that point about the confidence of these teachers that they might or might not have. Do they feel qualified to be able to teach this type of course? You know, I mean, that idea maybe is not so unfamiliar to many people who've started in EFL and have gone into, you know, EAP. I mean, I had that myself, you know. So how best to help these teachers to realise that actually they do have the skills that could transfer to this context, that they don't need to be subject specialists or experts in being knowledgeable about all the vocabulary that their students are going to learn, but what transferable skills do they have that they could apply here? So, you know, maybe bringing them some examples of particular theory of discourse analysis, maybe to help them to, you know, deconstruct, you know, text, repackage it, to help their students to understand the communicative practices of their discipline. You know, ways in which maybe we've all worked with different subjects, you know, ourselves in our EAP experience. So, yeah, giving them tools to kind of give them confidence to think that they can do this. So I have I started to put together a couple of material perhaps to use in this next induction that I might run. You know, this is just something around sort of getting teachers to put together a lesson plan and some questions to ask them around how they might consider the planning, the delivery of this particular lesson. There's some other ideas around bringing in sort of ideas around Leon Street's article on the differences between the three sort of models that go into the literacies, academic literacies idea, picking up on the socialisation concept, and then kind of connecting that to maybe social genre, cognitive genre theory, helping them to use those theoretical approaches to deconstruct text, and then apply that to texts that we are using on this course, and then to help them to, gradually introduce those things to break down and to create material themselves, I guess. So that's where I'm at. So yeah, where am I? I'm up there. Still early on, still up there. That's right. But yeah, I don't know how many cycles that this would necessarily take, or how many it needs to take. But from my understanding, reading of this, it can be forever if you want. But it seemed to suit my context at least anyway. So that's all I've got to say. And there's some citations there.